Welcome to Lesson 5 of Section 5 of the BJCP Tasting Exam Preparation Course from the Brews Anonymous Homebrew Club. We're still looking at the master level descriptions, and in Lesson 5, we are going to look at the description level examples for mouthfeel. So let's get started with our usual disclaimer. This episode in this series is not affiliated with, nor endorsed or checked by the BJCP, the AHA, or any other organizations discussed in any episode of this series. All right, we're continuing our look at the master level descriptions, and now we are on to mouthfeel. And in this lesson, you probably know the sequence already, although I made a change. We're now going to call it the minimal effort mouthfeel description, then move on to the certified level like mouthfeel description, the national level like mouthfeel description, and finally the master level like mouthfeel description. So let's start with that minimal effort mouthfeel. We're taking a look at the last beer characteristic specific section of our exam score sheet and what a master level description looks like. And again, we are covering category 18A American Pale Ale, and we'll start with this minimal effort mouthfeel, and that is, feels good, not too heavy, good bubbles. Man, there's like a couple jokes in there I think I could say, but it would push us off track. So let's just move on and say that there's not much to say here. I think we know what's wrong at this point, and we all know that we can do better. So let's just jump into something a little closer to a certified level like description. Medium body, medium carbonation, smooth finish, light astringency. Okay, we got a couple things to talk about here. One is that this is much better. The intensities help a lot. We're also pointing out that there's an astringent character we're clearly picking up. But this is still a little short. This is the hardest section of the score sheet. Filling this out completely is the most difficult of all of the fields we have to fill out. But it is doable, and there's some things we can do to make these descriptions better and closer to filling out all those lines. But before we get there, I want to side shift just a little bit and share this special kind of note to be aware of on the exam that we haven't talked about before. And this is taken directly from the BJCP scoring grading guide. Efficient use of vertical space. For perfect score, fewer than 2 blank lines remain on the completed score sheet. These are typically only in the appearance or mouthfeel sections on a master level score sheet. What this is saying is that 2 full blank lines are allowed in the score sheet before it starts negatively impacting your score. My suggestion, my strong suggestion, is that if you have to leave any lines blank, limit those to mouthfeel. Like I said, this is the hardest section to complete, and I've also said many times that we don't want to make things up that we're not experiencing just for the sake of filling up space. Mouthfeel is probably going to be the biggest challenge for that. So if you have to leave any blank lines, try to limit it to mouthfeel, and definitely try to limit it to 2. Less, of course, is even better. If you can get a couple words on one of those 2 lines just to put something on there so it's undeniably less than 2 lines, or 2 lines or less, whatever you want to call that, that would be perfect. I'm sharing this to hopefully take some pressure off when you complete that mouthfeel section. It is entirely possible to fill out completely, and we'll look at a national level description that starts to do that, but I also wanted to give a little relief from the pressure of having to fill it out completely, knowing that some space, we do have a little leeway with that if we need to take advantage of that during our exam. So let's go over that national level example now. Look how we can get closer to filling out that entire section. So the national like level description reads, medium light body to moderate carbonation. Carbonation adds a texture and carbonic bite. Smooth mouthfeel, but with a slight astringency in the finish. So what do we do here? Mainly, we expanded on each component. Medium body is better described as medium light for this beer. Moderate carbonation is still accurate. But what does the carbonation bring? It brings a certain sensation and character that would be missing without it. So we noted that. We've also broken down the mouth sensations a bit. The mouthfeel is overall smooth in the start, but it ends with an astringent character that we're noting now. We're pretty good right here. We're going to come close to filling up those lines. At most, we may have 1 blank line by the time we're done writing this, depending on the size of our handwriting. But we can step this up one more time and fill out everything that we possibly can, and maybe even spill into the lines underneath it in our master level description, which reads, medium light bodied with moderate creamy carbonation. Carbonation adds a welcome carbonic bite. Beer has a smooth, crisp texture that finishes dry and slightly astringent from the hop load. Again, we're expanding each character and addressing the texture more in both our description of the carbonation and the overall crisp character of the beer. We also acknowledge that the astringent character in the mouthfeel is also hop-driven and not necessarily from a process flaw. So, just to reiterate, and I'm not going to lie about this, and I don't think I have even come close to lying about this. This section is hard, but you know what we can do to make it easier come exam time? You got to be able to say it with me at this point. Practice, practice, practice. Get out some score sheets and focus on mouthfeel in a few beers. I think you may find that judging a few beers, concentrating mostly and if not solely on mouthfeel, will make you start to find even the smallest nuances that you can put into words to help you complete this section more than you have just making it part of the process overall. I think just taking a little time to concentrate on just a couple mouthfeel beers, scorings, I should say, or evaluations, is really going to help you. So at least give it a shot and see if it does. And on that note, we're at the end of this lesson, but we do have one more section to cover for our score sheet, and that's the overall impression. That section is where a majority of our feedback is going to be scored. And feedback is not scored the same as the aroma, appearance, flavor, and mouthfeel sections. In fact, you've probably, now looking back, noticed it was never mentioned in the definitions that we gave for the master level descriptions. That's because it's its own section. And it's going to be its own lesson in this section coming up next. We're going to explore what we're graded on in the feedback in that lesson. And we'll use all of our master level descriptions that we've written for this particular beer to base our overall impression and write the best one that we can for this beer on this score sheet as an example of what is hopefully a very, very good score sheet for an exam. So let's get to that. Let's move on to that next section.